You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Happy New Year. You're listening to the Break Podcast on Career Cloud Radio. I'm your host, Michael Garden. My first guest of 2023 may very well be the most interesting man in the world. Brian Gallagher, at Simple Man Guide on Twitter, is a corporate American turned global citizen. Brian did what many bright and talented people do right out of college. He went into finance. But a few years in, he had his break moment where he realized the money, the status, and the dream wasn't all it was cracked up to be. So he got out. He owned a fitness studio for a while and then did something even more drastic. He gave away 99% of his belongings and left the traditional path altogether to see the world and live life on his own terms. He created Simple Man Guide, a personal brand dedicated to helping others leave the corporate world behind, simplify their lives, and regain power over their most precious asset, their time. Brian currently lives in Amsterdam. In this episode, Brian and I talk about his break moment, how he got over what other people think, and how the key to building your own future is about prioritization. You'll take away some great tips and examples from Brian's story on how to choose yourself and how you can really do just about anything if you're willing to say no to traditional advice that often ends up being a trap. I hope you enjoy this episode with my friend, Brian Gallagher. This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. Brian, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat with you.
Yes, you and I recently met. And you're here kicking off 2023 with me. So I couldn't think of a better person to have share your story with our audience, and super excited for our conversation. So just to get things kicked off, to get everybody in the proper mindset and mood for this conversation, can you tell us where in the world you are right now?
I am in Amsterdam. I just recently got my residency here. My girlfriend took a job here, and she asked me if I would be willing to move there, and I had nothing tied me anywhere else. So I was like, yep, let's do it. I stepped off the plane and moved here.
Fantastic. And so to like set the table, like you grew up in the United States, you started a career in the United States, and you are now living abroad. And how long have you been essentially living abroad?
Officially living in the Netherlands for about 9 months, but in the last 3 years, I've been in the United States for probably a total of 3 months. I've been traveling around since about November 2019. So a little over 3 years.
All right. So you are living this digital nomad life. You've embraced it all the way, like top to bottom. So I want to kind of dig into that. I just love a good journey. I love a story. I love decisions. And so I want to start off with, in the beginning, give our audience an idea of your story arc, kind of what you were doing when you were living in the US, being a normal guy.
Yeah. So I went to a traditional path. I went to college. I kind of against what I initially wanted, though. I didn't really want to go to college, and I had my one friend, his dad asked me, like, what do you want to do when you get out of high school? And I was like, I had an interest in wood. I wanted to be a carpenter. And this guy pulled me aside, and he's like, you're an idiot. He's like, you're the smartest one of any of these guys. He's like, there's no reason you should not go to college. And I was like, started thinking about it. I'm like, okay. So I took the SATs and everything, and I didn't really know what to major in. And I think I started off in engineering until it got too into the weeds and physics. And I was like, I'm out of here. It's too much. And I didn't really know what to study. And my dad was like, why don't you pick finance? It always seems to be something that's in demand. He doesn't work in finance. He just kind of read it somewhere. And I was like, okay. I didn't do anything to kind of figure out what I really wanted. So I went to college. I went to Penn State University. I graduated, but when I was there, I didn't really know what finance people did, but all the people within the major wanted to go into investment banking. So I'm like, okay, I want to go into investment banking now. It paid the most. It seemed to have the most prestige, the most opportunities after you got out. So that's what I wanted to do. I didn't land a job in investment banking right out of college. I went and worked in accounting for 2 years in Johnson & Johnson. I knew I hated it pretty much right away. I did not hate it, but it wasn't for me. I didn't want to do this until I was 60. After I graduated this rotational program I was in, a buddy of mine told me about an investment bank that he knew was hiring. I interviewed, I got the job. I quit my other job and moved to New York City within a span of about 10 days. And I was off in investment banking world. I worked there for 9 years. I knew probably about 5 or 6 years in. I mean, it's a very different world. It was very difficult, but it was what I wanted. I wanted to work hard. I wanted to do something that was interesting. I was meeting great people. I was working with super smart people. So I was learning a lot, but I was working 80, 90 hours a week in the beginning, which was very difficult. But after about 5 years of that, I started to have different kind of feelings about like, man, do I really want to do this for the rest of my career? And I remember like a couple instances where like that really stuck out for me. Like, man, you better think about something else that you want to do, or you're going to be doing this for your entirety of your career. And there was one instance in particular where it was a Memorial Day weekend and I went to my girlfriend's house to go and like relax in her pool, have drinks and to celebrate like start the summer, and everyone else is in the pool and I'm sitting in her dad's office building like Excel models and PowerPoint presentations. And it just like, and I realized, I was like, man, the guy that's the senior guy who's 10 or 12 years older than me, he's also on these conference calls. I'm like, man, what am I working towards? I'm going to have this same lifestyle in 10 to 12 years if I don't kind of make a move now. Fast forward a couple of years, I had a buddy of mine approach me to start a fitness studio with him. He had this idea for a rowing focused fitness studio, and he asked me if I wanted to work on it with him. And I was like, absolutely. Like this is my out. You know, I've had an interest in fitness since I was a teenager. The time was right for fitness studios in New York City. Things started to be kind of like blowing up a little bit. So we had decided to start working on this and keep going until something told us to stop. And nothing really told us to stop. Everything was just like green light, green light, green light. We signed a lease to open our studio, and it came to a point where one of us needed to leave our jobs. And I'm 5 years older than him. I had a little more money saved. We decided that I was going to be the one to quit. And so I figured out when my bonus check was going to hit my bank account, and I was like, I'll quit that day. And then we'll have a month to get the studio running. Well, I got fired 10 days before I was going to quit. So that made the decision super easy. And then I was out. Like I felt so free. I always remember this part of like sitting across from the two partners at my firm. And as they're telling me it's the end of the road for me here, the hardest part for me was like not smiling and like show them that I was like excited and I had something else kind of brewing, and I was ready to go anyway. And I remember calling my mom and calling my girlfriend like the afternoon that I got let go, and they were both so kind of worried for me. And I was just like, no, everything is fine. Like I'm ready for this. Like this is perfect. And that kind of set me off on my journey for working for myself. And that was February of 2014. So this February, I'll be out 9 years, out of corporate 9 years, and kind of doing a number of different things since then. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I got here. I was in the US for probably another 2 years, 5 years before I left. We ran the studio until 2018-ish. And then after we closed it, I realized that I didn't really have to be in New York City anymore. I was kind of growing tired of the city. And the way I always describe it is like the things that pulled me towards the city when I was 25 are the very same things that kind of repelled me at 35. And I knew at that point it was time to go. And once we closed the studio down, I realized that I didn't have to be here anymore. So I lived in this really busy city for 14 years. I thought the perfect exit was a yoga retreat. So I was going to go for 1 month or 1 week to go sit on the beach and do yoga and eat good food. And I ended up finding a 1 month yoga teacher training that I ended up booking instead. And that kind of set me off on about two and a half plus years of just traveling around for pretty much wherever I wanted to go. I did at the time, right before I left New York, I did meet my current girlfriend. She's Italian. And so I've been bouncing in and out of Europe for the past 2.5 years until I just got residency in the Netherlands, where she got a job about a year ago. So that's how I got here. There's a lot in there. Feel free to jump in wherever you want.
Well, it's a great, inspiring story of taking ownership and doing, eventually doing what you want. But yeah, I got to rewind a little bit. So
yeah, sure.
I'm gonna dig into this. So, the break podcast. The break is about that moment where you have to break work. Something has to change. And so I want to go back to that moment sitting in, it was your girlfriend's dad's office.
Her office, yeah.
Yeah. So take me back to that moment, because that's the moment. That's the moment where you really realized it and you flash forwarded your life and you started asking the questions. What were you feeling around that moment?
That was probably the first moment where it really came into me. There's a couple other kind of very distinct moments that I remember thinking like, man, this is not for me. That was the first one. And because there's this mystique around like banking and like, hey, you work your ass off for the first couple of years and you can go all different angles. You can stay in banking, which not many people do, because it is a grind. It's a real grind. And as I looked at the guys that were doing it for a really long time, I mean, some of them seem pretty happy. I mean, it's probably just like you would see in any other mix of a corporate life. Like half the people are going to be pretty happy that they're there. Half the people are going to be, you can tell they're miserable as soon as you see them every day. Like it wasn't any worse or better in terms of like amount of people that were unhappy or wanting to leave this world, But it was just the fact that I had to travel down to Philadelphia where my girlfriend was, take a laptop with me. I had got this assignment put on me like probably the Friday afternoon of Memorial Day. Like there's just like no worse time to get a shitload of work dumped on you when you're just so excited to go and like celebrate that summer's finally here. It's like these carefree 3 months of the year. If you're not in banking, I mean, yeah, the other industry is probably you're a little more excited and there's a little more leeway with what you have to do. But just taking the train down to Philadelphia with the laptop, knowing I was going to be slammed and not really be able to do anything else during that weekend was just like it starts to wear on you after a while. And then you just have that. I just have that aha moment where it's like, okay, I'm 28, 29. And this guy who's the managing director on my deal team is also having his weekend interrupted by these conference calls too. And I just realized I was like, if I get to 40, 45 and I have a wife and I have kids and I'm on vacation, am I going to have to like go back to my room or go somewhere else and like not be able to enjoy the time that's supposed to be mine? Like all my time is supposed to be mine, but vacation specifically is like, hey, you're going to get away from all this stuff. And the fact that like that would never escape me was it just really hit me hard in that moment. And that was the first time of probably a few different instances where like that really came into my mind and really started to get me thinking.
So that time period is like 5-ish years in. Is that correct? Like about? Yeah,
that was about I would say 2009-ish. So I was probably almost just under 5 years into banking at that point, 7 years into my career.
Okay. So my next question is like, what were the actions that you were taking, or how did you think about that moment over the next few years? I assume there was a lot of resistance to I guess, admitting or coming to grips with like, I need a change.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard thing to deal with, especially when you're in a job and you're in an industry that so many people want to get into. And there's prestige with that. There's confidence with that. There's a feeling of like, oh, what do you do? You're like, oh, I'm in investment banking. You're like, it makes you feel good. You make a lot of money. I was saving a lot. I was able to go and buy whatever I wanted. It was like, I didn't really have any other cares except for I have no free time to do anything else. And I have to make plans with the caveat that like, I may have to go jump on a call, or I may have to go build a model, or I may have to go do something, So there was some resistance to that. And because part of it's like, yeah, it's safe. It's like the way I view corporate jobs is like, just don't mess up. And you can just continue to get this bi-weekly bank account top up. And it's a nice, comfortable feeling. But I think after a certain point, and when you're kind of like your financial obligations are covered, and I had started to save too. And like, I made a bunch of moves that it enabled me to continue building a nice cash base. Like there was at one point where I was considering buying an apartment, and I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment with my brother at the time. And my rent was pretty cheap for New York standards, for the average that people spend in New York City. My rent was pretty cheap. And I was looking at buying an apartment just because it was kind of what you did. It's like, okay, I've been working for 6 years. I have a good amount of money saved. I'm still living with someone else. Like, why don't I just go live on my own and get my own place? And I started looking at it, and the math just really frightened me. It was like my monthly expenses would have almost tripled if I bought a place, and I would have had to put 20 or 25% down on an apartment, which in New York City, if you're buying like a 1-bedroom apartment, is in a decent neighborhood is $600,000 at the time, or $500,000. So it would have required me to put at least $100,000 down in cash for a down deposit, for a down payment, which I knew in my head would put me right back where I was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, in debt, handcuffed to my job, having to maintain this salary level to pay for this apartment. Nothing, and for me, it was like, it doesn't even make any sense. I didn't even care. I didn't aspire to like own a home. I didn't care at all. I still don't own a home. Like, I didn't care. So after I looked at the math, I was like, no, I'm going to stay in this 2-bedroom apartment, and I'm going to save money because I know I want to get out, and that money could be put to better use later on. And that was like another major kind of step for me to help me get financially stable. And like, when the time came to leave my job, and to leave and not feel like I had to claw my way back, like I didn't panic and be like, oh my God, I need to get another job right now. It was just a breath of fresh air. It was just like, okay, you're set up for this. You have a plan in place. You're financially okay. Even if this fitness studio bombs in the first 5 months, you're fine, And that kind of like, those things built up over those 3 or 4 years, like, and all led to that point where like, okay, I'm ready to leave. It just took a while. It just took a while. And there's a lot of different reasons for it. It's just, It's hard. It's a hard jump to make.
Yeah, a couple of the things that stick out to me were, just the prestige and what you've worked for. It's like this sunk cost of, I did all this stuff to get here. Giving it up seems crazy. Yeah. So there's that. Yeah. And then something you said around your finances, and I talk to people about, when you manage change, you need a runway, because you don't know what the future is gonna hold. And so the best way to sort of see that you get through the other side is to give yourself enough of a cushion and a runway and take the pressure off. So you kind of sounded like you built that, and you didn't have the pressure to say, oh, I got to go right now. Like, I have to, when we have pressure, we make bad decisions. So that was really interesting, I thought, as well. And then the other thing that you said was, part of it was corporate safe route. And, and it's like, yeah, they are safe until you get fired, which ended up actually happening.
And you know what there was, funny enough, and I say this to people too, it's like you're only 2 words away from like that safety net being gone.
Yeah.
And I literally, when I tell you I had no idea this was coming until the day of, I knew nothing. But the funny part was, once I got the feeling, it was like I just knew right away. And I had the feeling the day of, and I'll never forget this. I went to lunch with a colleague of mine. We were both vice president level. So we had been there for 7 or 8 years. We had tons of years of experience in banking. And we both went to lunch that day. And I told her, I was like, I'm about 75% sure I'm getting let go today, because both of our reviews were scheduled for that day. And it was really strange because they're usually scheduled a couple weeks in advance. I didn't hear anything about mine until like 2 days before. And I was like, something just feels weird. The guy that I usually work with was like, he just said a couple weird things and was like staffing different people on his deals. And I'm like, something's going on. And then I like the day of, I was like, yeah, this is happening today. And then it happened. And I was like, okay, I'm ready. You know, I know that happens to a lot of people, that they get caught with their pants down. It's like, they don't see it coming, and they don't have a plan B. They don't have anything prepared. And I feel like it makes the most sense to kind of always have something prepared or ready, not only just in case you get laid off, but just because it kind of makes you think differently. It gives you some energy, especially if it's something that you enjoy doing. And I was building a fitness studio in the background. It was like, I couldn't think of anything better that I wanted to do at that time. And it was like, it gave me so much life outside of work. But also gave me, I called it, I went on the path of least resistance after I figured out that we were opening the studio, because, and what I mean by that was like, I would volunteer for deals sometimes if there was good people to work with that had deals coming in. I was like, oh, can I work with you on this? When that point came around, I was like, basically like with my head in the sand and just poked up a little bit, you know, not enough that the hope is that you could do it. You do it just enough to not get fired. But apparently I failed at that and did it a little too much. But that was what I went on the path of least resistance for about a year, just trying to keep my head down and do enough work to stay, but it didn't work.
You're listening to the Break Podcast, powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. My buddy Matt Doan, who I think you know, calls that like turning your job into a utility and viewing it as a utility. And I would say you probably did it perfectly, like skating in with 10 days in between, you know, when you were going to leave and getting fired, I would say is like hitting the bullseye. So that's, I would say you got it perfect.
Say that.
Go ahead.
It's funny that you said one little funny snippet that you said about you timed it perfectly. So it was the two guys that let me go were two managing partners, but the CEO, who I'd known since I first started there, these other two guys came in later and kind of tried to revamp the firm and everything. But the CEO, who I knew and actually like interviewed me and like was a super nice guy to work for, I walked over to his office. I was like, okay, John, I guess that's it. He's like, I just want to congratulate you on your near perfect exit. He's like, we know you had this other thing going on. It's like, the fact that he saw that and said that to me was like, it made me laugh.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Sweet. I want to move on a little bit, and with your permission, I'm going to skip the studio, fitness studio years a little bit. And I want to get into what you're doing, you know, right now and what your focus is today. Because so tell everybody kind of what your focus is and how you're helping people today. And that gives you freedom to sort of, you know, live where you want to live and chase your girlfriend from Italy to Amsterdam and all over the place.
Yeah, wherever she gets a job. Yeah. So what I'm doing now is helping people kind of do the same exact thing that I did. I prepared myself financially. I prepared myself by kind of building a business on the side and running like what I call this parallel path track to get myself out of this situation that I know I didn't want to be in for the rest of my career. So there's a lot of stuff in there that people need help with. And the three that I cover in my coaching program, which is what I'd focus on predominantly now, is money, work, and mindset. So kind of the three things I mentioned too, as we were going through this, it was like, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty that's kind of packaged in that whole idea that you can go out and work for yourself. And you can do it. And what I think I've figured out as I've done this is like how to kind of pull out of you what it is that you can do that can help other people and that can provide an income stream for you. And I wasn't able to do it right out of my corporate career. So I didn't leave my corporate job and then just go right into coaching and tell people how to do it. It's like, I had a lot of experience along the way. I took a few stops at different things that didn't necessarily work out for me, that weren't that weren't maybe they were things that I really enjoyed, but weren't things that a market needed at that point, or things that I could do but maybe they wouldn't support me. So I think I've kind of figured out a formula and a way to uncover what it is that people can do. And I don't have it canned like, hey, leave your corporate job. I'm going to teach you how to run an Amazon drop shipping business. It's like, no, we're going to look at what you know how to do, what you were interested in doing, and what your unique experience is, and try to figure out what it is that you are uniquely qualified to do. So helping people figure out what it is they want to do. I think some people have maybe a misconception that it's like, I'm going to get you on the phone and I'm going to throw a bunch of ideas at you and I'm going to kind of prepare like a business for you. It's like, no. I'm going to pull the answers out of you. I'm going to ask you the right questions, and we're going to get to something that makes sense for you, that you'll enjoy doing, that can also earn you an income. And that's where I spend most of my time now, in terms of work, is building that business, is networking with people, creating content and all that kind of stuff, and doing client calls. And that's where I spend my working time these days.
Yeah, we're on, really similar paths in how you were describing pulling things out. And I use a little bit of a process that I've created called advantage mapping. And it's really similar. It's like, what do you do today that you're really good at, that you're not really giving enough credence to? And you're, aligning your interests and taking all of these different other ways that you can create advantage in your life, and packaging that and getting people to think creatively about how they could use that in some way. And so that's where the magic is. And by definition, you as the coach can't come with the ideas in that,
right?
In that thing. So it's sort of this, having done it a few times for people, it's this magic that gets me, is lighting me up, and I'm sure it lights you up too, of like when people put the light bulb and say like, oh shit, like I can actually do something different, and I can give myself permission now to do something different. So that's amazing. One of the things that you talk about a lot, and not a lot of other, I think people who talk about go quit your job, go do a side hustle, be entrepreneurial, they don't talk about it, is the finance component, which we talked about a little bit. But can you hammer home why that's such a big idea of like the planning process around finances in terms of managing any type of change?
Mainly because, and I feel that if we are in a situation where we leave that safety of the paycheck, we're automatically going to be put into a position where we feel like we have to make decisions based out of fear. And what I usually see is that if people are not prepared and they have an instance where they are laid off, the first instinct is to, okay, I have to go get another job. But without stopping to think about like, did I even like what I was doing? And do I want to just go do the same thing again? Like, here's my opportunity, if I'm financially prepared, to like maybe take a few weeks, take a month, take 2 months, which is something I usually recommend, if financially feasible for whoever I'm working with, because it gives you time to think outside of that corporate box. It's very difficult to think outside of it when you are in it and you're doing it day to day, and you think that's your only option to go make a living for yourself. And I see this all the time, and I call it like you're actually like, you jump from one frying pan into another, where it's like you're unhappy in one position without uncovering why you're unhappy. You go and do something similar. And I think about this too, in terms of if you're unhappy with your boss, or you have a bad role, or you got stuck on a bad project, like, yes, you could go and cure that symptom temporarily by going in a different company that may have a different manager, right? Like you can kind of work your way around one thing. But if you have not uncovered the underlying reason why you're unhappy in this job, or what's missing in your life, or what else you think you want to do, you will ultimately end up in the same position again, having those same feelings. So if you are financially prepared, you can give yourself a little breathing room to kind of stop and think, maybe there's something else I can at least explore. And I always tell people too that the worst case scenario is you just go get another job. Like, it's not the end of the world. You can go try, but that financial stability gives you the opportunity to do that without just jumping right into another job right away.
Yeah, it's just a way I talk a lot about managing uncertainty and managing risk. And it comes from my trading background. And that's how I approach the world. And having, I mean, the stark reality is we don't know and cannot really predict how something in the future is really going to work. So there's inherently variability and uncertainty around that. And the only way that you manage that is by having like a good foundation, like a resilient foundation. And that can come in the form of finances or just keeping your job. Don't go quit your job, right? Keep your job because your job is a cash flow that you can use to invest into whatever else that you want to do and create that kind of optionality and that option portfolio for you in the future. So I think it's a really interesting part where people are mostly talking to financial advisors about the finance side, right? But it's like your career and your finances and what you want to do and your ultimately how you feel as a human being and create value are intricately linked. And you're not going to,
you can't compartmentalize those.
Right. And so you're not going to get the same advice or the right advice for managing change out of a financial advisor, like in this type of situation. So I'm really glad that you're hammering on that because I think it's a huge, huge topic. I'm going to switch around a little bit. I want to go right into a couple big questions, which is like what you've obviously broken your career a couple different times. What do you see like as the biggest barrier that prevents people from making their own break? Is it psychological? Is it what is it?
I mean, it's psychological, but I mean, the big one that everyone talks about is money. How are they going to make it going forward? And I think there is a fear around like variability with income too. It's like if you're not making something steady, I think everything that we have to pay for is steady, right? So it's kind of like thinking of it in an accounting way, like trying to match revenue and expenses. Like if you are earning in this kind of like unsteady way, but everything else you have to pay is steady, I think that becomes a little bit uncertain too. But the biggest thing far and away is money. Like people get so comfortable too in what they are currently earning. And again, you could break this into different chunks. Like if you're talking to somebody who's 25 and who has $50,000 of student loans, they're in a much different position financially, and it's going to take them much longer to get out than someone who's been working for 10 years and is 33 and has $50,000 in the bank. Like those are wildly different positions to be in, and they'll have wildly different timeframes as to when they can get out of this job. But I think money still is the biggest one. There is some psychological kind of holdbacks for people, but I think a lot of them relate to money. They all come back to money. But there is a little bit of a fear of like, what else am I going to do? And what are people going to think of me? I mean, we all get caught up in that. I mean, it's very difficult where the one place where we're marketing our services is the one place that's kind of poisoning us in another way, right? Like you try to not compare with other people, and I think that's part of it. Where you're getting back to the money thing, it's like that money and that job is what kind of gave us almost like a status or a position or a ranking. And you're not ready to lose that right away. And I think social media kind of exacerbates that problem a little bit for people that are in this position, because you're seeing all these people who are doing all these great things. Everyone shares the highlights, and we know all that stuff that people say about social media. But I think that's another thing that's like you are seeing one thing, but you're feeling a different one. And it's very difficult to kind of give that safety and that comfort and that rank or prestige that you've worked so hard for. Like we were talking about earlier, it's like, man, did I want to quit that job that was paying me a good amount of money and then go do something that I knew was going to give me an 80% pay cut? Like that's really difficult to swallow, not only just financially, but just as a person, like your confidence, your status, where you see yourself falling in society. I mean, that is a very difficult thing to shut off how you are perceived by other people. I mean, yep. I haven't figured it out 100% yet, but it's really hard.
Yeah, completely. And I agree with you on the money thing, but I think ultimately it comes down to psychology, because what's happening is we're just weighing the factors incorrectly. Like we're putting too much weight on money or the job title as a source of my happiness. And we're just wrong about that, right? And we're failing to say, okay, I'm willing to, like, my favorite question is, what are you willing to give up in order to feel the way that you want to feel? And I think when you answer things that way, like you can say, there's a lot of fear around, well, I can't take a pay cut because somebody's going to look at me like he's taking a step down. And what are they going to say? But at the end of the day, like, it's about you and your willingness to do that. And I think from your story and in your situation, like, you clearly had some mindset where you said, you know what, I don't care. Everybody's buying a house. Like, that's the thing that you're supposed to do, but I don't fucking care. So so that's why I kind of think, you gotta, like, the mindset and the psychology is so important in this process. And one of the ways that you manage that is obviously through risk control, and that comes into like the tactical money strategies that you talk about. So, yeah,
getting another thing that I feel like that I run through or spend a lot of time with people on is level of expenses and what people think they need versus what they actually want. And that has been huge and insanely eye-opening for many people, when not many people have just voluntarily gone in and reviewed where the last 3 months of their salary have gone. And when some people do that, it's really like, oh my God, like, I could literally probably spend 50% less or 30% less and save this and build myself a cushion. I have no savings. Why am I buying all this? It's like, some of that stuff is just totally eye-opening. And to have people go through that exercise it's actually the first thing I do with people, because I think it's one of those things where it's like, you instantly see something that you didn't see before. And I like being able to do that with people that I'm working with. It's like, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to run through that. And they're like, holy shit, like, I'm spending a lot of money. And it's like my favorite thing to do as step number one. Yes, it makes a ton of sense. I'm going to run into some of our rapid fire questions, if you don't mind. Sure. Take a little cadence, switch up and break here. So these are questions that I ask every guest, and let's go. So, is there a recent author, thought leader, influencer that you've come across that has caught your attention and that you think people should know about? I got into this through like the ClickFunnels community. So there's a lot of garbage in there. There's a lot of shit you have to sift through. And I thought this guy came out of that community, so I kind of brushed him off at first. Alex Hormozi. He's got some really, really good stuff. I just read his book, $100 Million Offers. It was like $1 on Amazon. So I was like, let me check it out. And he really does have some smart stuff in there. And then when I first saw him, I didn't follow him on social media. I was like, I don't really believe what this guy says. But after reading and then after watching some more of his videos, he's legit. He's got some really good stuff. Excellent. What book are you reading now or have read recently that's influenced you? I just read a fiction book for the first time in like 3 years. I had this fascination with like 1950s LA and Vegas, and I just read something on it now. But it was kind of nice to take a break from having to feel like I needed to read something business related. And I just set this resolution for myself for 2023. I am not buying a single book the entire year. I have too many books that I've started or I haven't finished yet. And I have too many books that I've read once that I haven't read again that I'm going to go back and reread. So I could give you 2 or 3 that I plan to reread this year. One of them is The Success Principles, which is my first and favorite self-improvement book that I read. I like, my favorite biography is Benjamin Franklin, American Life from Walter Isaacson. So I'm going to reread that again. That Franklin book is fantastic. I have it. Yeah, so good. I've read it. Yep, so good. What was the 1950s LA book? What do you have the title? It was called Dreamtown by David Baldacci or something. Some kind of like, churns out like a book a year, I think. Yes. It was fine. It was a series he had on an investigator. Pretty good. Okay. Do you have one piece of advice for someone just starting out or trying to get a foothold in this world? Pay attention to what you enjoy doing and what kind of lights you up. I have this one tip. If I go through a bunch of things that I say to people, I'm like, call your best friend. And it's not just to like get a bunch of laughs and reminisce with them, but they know exactly what lights you up and what you love to do and what you were good at. And they can see it in your face and everything changes when you're talking about it. Ask them if you don't know what it is. So pay attention to more what you want to do. And if you don't know what it is, call your best friend and ask them.
I love it because I think now more than ever, there's so many ways to pull an income stream out of what you love. And I think to the audience, me at 41 and Brian here, we took too long. And now, we're still leaning into, and I'm still leaning into it, today and this year and upcoming. So I think that's fantastic advice. Last rapid fire one is, what's getting you excited about the next 12 months? There's a lot of dreariness and anxiety around. What has you excited about the future?
I am excited to go on another trip again. I was just talking about my girlfriend with this. I feel 2021, I had like the best travel year I've ever had in my entire life. And then 2022, I didn't do as much as I would have liked. So 2023, I'm looking to get out and do a little more exploring and adventure for this year. That's kind of my top goal. I mean, I have business goals, but to get out and see a part of the world that I have not seen is at the top of my list for this year.
What are some of those trips where you're looking?
I'm looking at Morocco, which I think I'm going to go to. I want to go to Jordan. I want to go to Israel. I want to do some more exploration in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia. I want to go to Oman. I want to go to Argentina, Chile, and where else? I think I want to go to Thailand too. I have not been to Thailand.
It sounds amazing. And for the audience too, like Brian's not sitting here worth a couple $100 million just blowing jet setting all over the place. He has just prioritized what he wants in his life and has an income that works with that. And he has adjusted his lifestyle to do those things, right? So I want them to be like crystal clear, because it's all about the priorities that we make and how we structure it. You can do pretty much anything as long as you get really, really good at prioritizing. So those sound like great spots. So I have a couple of questions from audience as well that I want to tee up here. And so to stay on the travel theme, I want to ask you first about the trip that you took that changed your completely changed your mindset.
Yeah, it was yesterday. It was actually the 11th anniversary of me and my friends doing that. We hiked Mount Kilimanjaro over New Year's. And the thing that it did for me was it made me realize how little I need. And I always say this, travel is really like the ultimate hack to really see how much you need and how much you can literally pare your expenses down to almost nothing. If you prioritize, like you just mentioned, you can I could have gotten a 2-bedroom apartment in a high-rise luxury elevator building with a pool on the roof, but I stayed in a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate so I could go out and do this other stuff later. And travel is the best way to figure out what that is. So Kilimanjaro, I spent 3 weeks with 6 friends. 3 I knew really well, 3 I didn't know until that trip, but we had the best time. I only had a backpack full of clothes on me. I had water, I had some food, and I had nature every day. And I wanted to know how I could replicate that to some extent in my New York City life. And so when I got home, I walked into my apartment and I felt instantly overwhelmed with how much stuff I had in my apartment. And I'm a pretty clean, organized guy. But I had so many things in my apartment, and I went on a complete tear and got rid of pretty much everything, to the point where I had people come in my apartment and they're like, you just moved in here. I was like, no, I've been here for 7 years. I just literally got rid of everything and started to really pare down and decide what I needed and what I needed to spend on. I pretty much cut all my spending on that, or at that point on anything. I used to love getting custom suits and nice watches. I cut all that stuff out, and just really prioritized what I wanted to do later. I didn't care about now as much, and the material things, even as big as an apartment. I just didn't care about it. It was I wanted to go and do this other stuff and see other parts of the world and be my own boss and work for myself. And if I couldn't make the same money I made in banking, so be it. I didn't need it. I didn't need all that.
Awesome stuff. Staying on the travel theme, I think, how did you meet your girlfriend? What's the story behind that?
it's interwoven in my travel stories, but I met her on Instagram in 2019. I saw her on my Explore page. I just randomly shot a DM to her across the Atlantic, and we started talking. And 2 months later, I was flying over to Europe to meet her, and we've been together ever since. That's 3 years ago. Now I live in Amsterdam with her.
That's quite the story, and the power of connection. Across the world, or in a network, or whatever. I mean, that's life altering stuff. That's really, really interesting.
Totally random.
All right. Advice for someone early on building their way out of the corporate world.
First and foremost, I would say, make sure you have 6 months of expenses in cash. And the second thing I would say to that, that's very tightly related, is check your monthly expense level. Make sure you are cutting what you can cut out of it, because I think most people don't realize how much kind of fluff is in there. So getting your financials in order would be first and foremost. And that's something that I say to people because, okay, you don't have an idea for what you want to do right now. That's fine. You can still work on your financials. That could be step number one. And that could take you months depending on where you're starting. So don't be in such a rush that you have to quit your job now. This is not a linear process where it's like, okay, I quit my job here and then I have to start doing what I'm going to do next. It's like, no, there is so much overlap here where you can do this any way that works for you. And that's part of the thing that I help them do, is like figure out the way for them. There is a formula, or there is steps, but they don't have to be in the same order, in the same time length, and in the same kind of degree for everyone. But having that process and having someone help you guide you through that process, hopefully you can do it in a lot less time than you or I did it. So financials is step number one.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And that, I mean, again, even if it's not getting out of corporate, maybe it's just doing something different, but that cash situation and that foundation gives you optionality. Pressure's off.
Yes.
You get to decide. You're in the driver's seat. So I love that advice. Last audience question: what's your favorite WOD? You're a fitness guy. Workout of the day. What's your favorite? What's your favorite workout of the day? I know that,
Marcus. This one's for you, my man. I recognize this question. So I got a couple. I was big into body weight workouts. So as I was traveling around, I didn't want to have to worry about a gym. So I really went heavy into body weight stuff. And I even wrote a couple body weight workout books that I was selling before I got into coaching. My favorite one that I'm doing now is kind of a variation of Murph, which is a big CrossFit workout. I run 2.5 miles to this outdoor gym near my apartment. I do 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and then I run back 2.5 miles. That's my favorite. My favorite, if I'm using weights, is probably one called Fran from CrossFit. If you've done CrossFit, you're familiar with it. It is 2 movements. It only depending on how fast you are, could take you under 5 minutes. I used to be able to do it in under 3, not anymore. It's thrusters and pull-ups. You do 21 of each, 15 of each, 9 of each, and it will completely gas you. That's probably my favorite.
Okay, I'm familiar. I'm actually working up to the full Murph as we speak. I'm on a long road to getting back to feeling like an athlete, but that's actually something that I'm doing. So that's really interesting. All right.
Are you doing vest or no vest?
I'm using both just because I'm trying to mix it up. So I'll do, a workout where I'm doing pull-ups, and then I'll the couple days later, I'll throw the vest down just to try to help. So I do have both, but
oh, nice.
You're listening to the Break Podcast, powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. I'm interested to know, what is your biggest lesson that you learned along your personal journey, kind of like breaking breaking work, breaking the constructs, breaking these things, and allowing yourself to live a more open and creative life. What's the takeaway from you, the biggest lesson out of your personal story?
There's two, I would say, and it's probably a pretty close tie between these. The first one is to start doing as soon as you can and plan a little, do a lot. And we ran into this with the fitness studio where we had a kind of like an aha moment. We had built a business plan like good little investment bankers would. We talked to investors. We talked to a bunch of other people in the space. And after about 3 or 4 months of doing this and kind of coming up with our plan, what we wanted to do, we realized we haven't even taught any classes yet. Like, we don't even know what this is going to look like. We have no idea. So we bought equipment, we rented a space, and we found that what we thought the class was going to be was actually boring and people hated it. So we had to completely revamp everything, and we would have never known that until we actually taught the class. So plan a little, do a lot, and do it early. Do it as much as you can early to get feedback and get this out there, whatever you want to do out there. The second one would be, if you are able to break out of the comparison game, that is going to be a major roadblock for you in any sense of the way. And man, if I'm being 100% honest, I still have it sometimes. I'm 42. And I have friends that are like on their second beach house by now, or like they've stayed the path and they're CEOs of public companies. Like, I could have done something similar, but then I look back and I get caught in this trap sometimes too. It's like, man, I could have been doing that. And then I think, yeah, but I wouldn't have done the 10 years of stuff that I did that I really loved and really felt alive doing. So if you can remove yourself from that comparison game, and I'm not saying that I know how to do it, I'm saying if you're able to figure it out, tell me and then try to do it for yourself, because it's really difficult to do. But that has been major for me in not getting caught in that, because I think that would have kept me in the same path. But being able to kind of figure out what it is you want and then only focus on that and not focus on what everybody else wants for their lives. Everybody's got their own life. Do your own thing, focus on what you want. You're only racing against yourself. It doesn't really matter what everyone else is doing.
Yep. I love that. That's the secret sauce. I'm not good. I'm way better at it now. But of course, we're human. I get caught up in the comparison game as well. But I think it's the secret sauce. So yeah, if anybody has completely figured it out, please let us know.
Let me know, because I know how to do it.
All right, Brian, I want to know where people can find you online. What's the name of your site? What's the name of the offerings you have? Where can people learn more about you and follow you and your journey?
Yeah, my website is simplemanguide.com. So it's guide, Guide. And that name came out from me trying to simplify kind of health and wellness stuff when I first started going off on this journey outside of corporate. And I just kept the name because I thought it worked. I'm on Instagram as Simple Man Guide. I'm on Twitter as Simple Man Guide. I'm on LinkedIn as Brian Gallagher, which is my name, my full name. And that's it. I think that's where you can find me, any one of those places.
All right. Well, we will make sure we link to all of that in our show notes page. And when we do start promoting the show, Brian, I think you might be the most interesting man in the world. You might have to start doing some Dos Equis commercials. But I really appreciate you being here. I'm glad we've been connected and are becoming friends.
Likewise.
And
likewise.
I really appreciate you giving your time to our audience.
I'm honored that you asked me to be on, and my pleasure, truly. I've really enjoyed connecting with you and hearing your story too, and looking forward to staying in touch and hopefully doing something together sometime soon.
Awesome, man. Well, appreciate it. Take care. Enjoy your weekend. And wherever I may see you next time we connect, I will want to hear more stories about your travel experiences.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
Right,
thanks so much, Michael. Enjoy your weekend.
Take care.